Foster, Joseph Lipinski, Angel Cook, Justin Cook, they're going to be followed by Brian Cook, Deborah Dove, Aurora Dove, and Nancy Hallman. All right, is Joseph Lipinski here? Joseph Lipinski, Angel Cook, Justin Cook, Brian Cook, Deborah Dove, come on down. No, Deborah Dove, Aurora Dove. I think some of these people may have signed up yesterday and may not be here today. Nancy Hallman, she's here. Dwayne Lambert. Dwayne Lambert. Dixie Hairston. There's one seat left right up here. Come on down. And before we get started with them, Diana Martinez, Susan Millam, Charles Orcher, and Ashley Harris can sit in the seats in front. Okay, I'm going to start with Mr. Foster. You know the routine. Go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Mike Foster, and glad to be here. I would like to talk about trauma-informed care this morning. The Sunset Commission suggested, and the Stephen Group report stated, that trauma-informed care initiatives should be halted. That would be a huge mistake. Trauma-informed care holds our best hope for real change in a broken system. Do not delay its implementation. We know that children suffering from trauma who are not healed will likely have a loss of productivity over their lifespans, and the public systems such as healthcare, child welfare, social services, law enforcement, criminal justice, and education will carry the long-term burden of these costs. The greatest tragedy is that these children will parent as they were parented and create another generation of abused and traumatized children for the state to raise, and we have not been good parents. Trauma-informed care is the critical strategy to improve safety, well-being, and permanency outcomes for our kids and families. It is the most effective treatment modality and the most efficient service delivery system. Its efficacy is being proven all around the country and in Texas. The return on the investment will be profound and the outcomes are sustainable. Trauma-informed care connects children to safe, healthy relationships that will last a lifetime. All across the country, deeper end service systems like substance abuse, mental health, juvenile justice, and child welfare have gradually moved to embrace trauma-informed services. We have passed a number of bills over the last 2 legislative sessions recognizing the importance of trauma-informed care to improve services to children and families. This is not the time to retreat from this modest beginning. We have to shift the culture to shift the system. Scientists and researchers in the last several decades have made great strides in understanding the impact on trauma on the developing brain. We know that early experiences, whether adverse or positive, have a profound impact on lifelong well-being. We recognize that traditional service approaches label and pathologize kids and are focused on what's wrong with them. There's a new term that has been coined called system-induced trauma to describe the damage done by the lack of stability, competency, and disrupted relationships inherent in our current models of care. We have disempowered and devalued youth and families. Trauma-informed care asks not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. It's a holistic, centered response trying to improve the all-around well-being, recovery, and healing rather than just providing treatment. We now know that healing will only happen in a safe, stable, and healthy relationship. DFPS and its services will be best served by changing from the ground up. Redesign is just shuffling contracting mechanisms, and positive outcomes are far in the future if we're going to rely on that. Highly traumatized kids need highly trained caregivers.
Mr. Foster, your time's up,
Right.
but we have your written testimony. We appreciate your being here today.
Yes, thank you.
To testify, thank you. Mr. Lipinski, go ahead.
It's me.
Good.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm a little nervous. Now, could I ask them to pass this out, please? 'Cause
It's coming right now, thank you.
you can tell I'm not an expert because it's only 3 pages. Okay. So, if you take the last page first, this is what I wrote, and my daughter's pleading with me just to read what I wrote, so.
Go ahead.
Okay, now, this is from my own experiences, and from my research. I was an industrial engineer, so, you know, quantitative analysis and all that. So, my comment is that the issue is the Department of Family and Protective Services, which does a wonderful job, I'm not here for blame or anything, does not provide the over 200 rural counties in Texas with child placement services for adoption of the abused and battered children in its ward. Now, what I found out is, because I went to a seminar put on by the El Paso office, and if you want to put down 2 people that are superior, it's Vera Robinson. She's a faith-based specialist, and her superior, who is Diana Lopez.
Good to know.
Well, when we signed up, I decided to want to adopt kids. I'm retired, so I have all day, every day. And so, anyway, we made out the application, and I was about to take their, what they call pride. Oh boy, I better go. All right, contracts. In other words, they contract with CPAs to provide these, adoptions, but only currently, and it's nobody's mistake, in the county in which the office is. So if you look at this map, anything in white or light tan, 251,000 square miles and 5 million people, don't have the coverage necessary from the CPA to adopt. So, just one more, 17 seconds, okay. The next chart from the report. This is the flow chart. I was an industrial process engineer, and it shows you from day 1 to day 365 what the courts take, right? And at the bottom you can see it says, and also another 6 months. Well, what I'm recommending is, and adoption is way down here, right? What I'm recommending is that the department plus the child placement agencies work together so that the CPA person knows the child from day 1. I mean, we know all these children want love, right? And there's nobody to blame for it, but as you can see, all the pictures are different. Each child is different.
Mr. Lipinski, your time's up, but I'm going to ask that the department staff call you because I think you may be on to something. So I'm married to one of you engineer guys. It's hard. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Angel Cook? No. Is Angel Cook here? Okay, I just want to make sure. I'll call you here in a minute. I will make sure we get to the people that are in front of us. I know, Nancy. Tell me your name.
Dixie Hairston.
Dixie, go ahead.
My name is Dixie Hairston. I'm from the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work, and I'm a recently licensed Master of Social Work with an expertise in child trafficking and sexual exploitation. Members of the Texas Sunset Commission, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I am encouraged by the recommendations of the Sunset Commission staff report, and while each issue is vitally important, I would like to speak particularly on the issue of children in foster care who are vulnerable to becoming victims of human trafficking. Unfortunately, Texas has become a hub for human trafficking activity. A statewide study conducted in 2010 documented 740 cases of adolescent girls being marketed for commercial sexual activities across Texas during a 30-day period. The same study also found that 188 adolescent girls are sexually exploited for commercial purposes in Texas on any given weekend. Children who have a history of abuse or those within the Child Protective Services system, particularly those in foster care, are especially vulnerable to human trafficking. According to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, 60% of likely child trafficking victims reported missing were either in foster care or a group home prior to being trafficked. With no way to survive on their own, they are lured into a life of being trafficked for sex. We applaud the state's effort and leadership in this area thus far, particularly in the development of a human trafficking awareness training curriculum developed by the state's Human Trafficking Prevention Task Force. However, further action is needed to ensure the implementation of this training curriculum so that DFPS employees become increasingly prepared to work with and protect this vulnerable population. I ask the Commission and DFPS administration to please consider the following. Enhance training requirements for all DFPS caregivers to include the state-developed human trafficking awareness curriculum that includes specific information on the youth they supervise, and to require that all DFPS employees complete the state-developed human trafficking training as a part of the basic skills development training. If implemented, these recommendations will allow DFPS to better identify, prevent, and protect youth in the foster care system from being vulnerable to human trafficking through continuous support and innovative, effective training. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony today, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you for being here. Are you familiar with the Joint Interim Committee on Human Trafficking?
Yes, ma'am.
This was a topic that came up, and I would encourage you to contact both of their co-chairmen, Senator Huffman in the Senate and Representative Thompson in the House, both from Houston. You're from Houston.
Thank you.
Because they are moving full steam ahead on this, and that topic sure did come up on that committee. So thank you for being here. Okay, Ms. Holm.
I'm Nancy Holman. I'm the director of the Texas Alliance of Child and Family Services that represents private organizations that contract with DFPS to provide services to the children in their care. I'd like to speak to issue 3, the risks and challenges in reforming or restructuring the foster care system. First, I think we need to acknowledge that any time we restructure a service delivery system, there is risk that's going to be involved in that change. But I think we also have to acknowledge that under the current service delivery system, we have been unable to manage the development of resources where they're needed for children. And under the current contracts and payment system, we're not able to put the kinds of performance outcomes in contracts that we would like that would improve outcomes and quality for services for children. Foster care redesign is about trying to address both those issues in a single model. Regarding the staff recommendations requiring DFPS to develop a long-range implementation plan for the foster care redesign, we support that in part. We think directing the department to develop a long-range implementation plan would be very helpful across the state for communities to prepare and do their own strategic planning. Our concern is with the recommendation that we delineate in statute roles and responsibilities in case management under the new model. As we move through implementation and we transfer more authority to contractors to work with families and to get paid under a case rate, we believe those roles and responsibilities are going to continue to need to be examined, both for duplication of effort, what the cost is involved in that duplication of effort, and the inefficiencies it might present to delivering greater, faster permanency for children. So we'd like to keep that out of statute at this stage. We haven't even fully implemented one catchment area to evaluate those pieces. The other issue I want to touch on is the recommendation that we have a thorough cost and performance analysis before we proceed. There is going to be we are suffering from not having adequate funding in this project. And I'd like to point out, though, that we're hoping that's addressed and understand that investing in the reform system, addressing those costs, it would be the first time we'd be attaching that investment to an outcome-based system. So I think that's really an important distinction to recognize when we're looking for investment here. It's an investment in change that is an improvement to long-standing issues. Also, I just want to point out that each of these catchment areas are very diverse, both in terms of the resources that are existing, the challenges they face. We learn as much out of each catchment area as we do the steps within each catchment area. So I would argue that continuing to roll out a similarly sized catchment area, the element of risk that would be added to that is very slight in relation to the benefits and additional data we might gain from that. I have written testimony that also presents some recommendations on strengthening enforcement in regulated care.
Great, thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Thank you to this entire panel. Now, there were 3 individuals that I called earlier, and I'll ask them to come up. Angel Cook, Justin Cook, Brian Cook. And let's see, I'm assuming Deborah Dove. Is Deborah Dove here?
Can my daughter go with Angel because there's nothing in my...
Sure, come on.
Just give me a cipher.
Sure. Okay, well, that's that now. And they will be followed next by Dwayne Lambert, Diana Martinez, Susan Millam, and Charles Orter. Let's start out with the Cooks. Are y'all related, or you just happen to have the same last
He's
name?
my 2 out of 8 of my children.
Ooh! You go. Good.
Thank you.
Go ahead. And you're Angel?
Yes.
Go ahead.
My name is Angel Cook, and today I stand before you not as a victim, but a survivor of Child Protective Services. In 2010, I had my first experience with the Texas Department of Protective Services when a family member dropped off her son, who was a victim of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse at the age of 2. I contacted CPS after discovering complete handprints, cuts, scars, burns, and bruises that covered his entire body, and later found out at the hospital he was left with a lifelong STD. CPS issued me a safety plan to keep his bio mom away and simply abandoned him in my care. They offered no advice, no funding, no health insurance, nothing. My adopted son was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, reactive attachment disorder, and a mood disorder, as well as anal warts. I was left to help him through his daily nightmares, his shaking when men entered the room, and his many outbursts of anger. I adopted my son, but sadly on March 22, 2013, my son passed away due to the abuse he endured. When ambulances came, they called CPS due to the scarring that was on his body from previous abuse. I told the workers of his prior history, but they removed my 7 children anyway. All because my social worker refused to take the time to look up his prior case in their care. Not once did she say, "I'm sorry for your loss." Instead, she repeatedly told me I killed my baby boy. During the police investigation, my worker hid my son's CPS records, my son's HIV status from detectives. She lied under oath and stated I had no family to take my children, although I have 9 brothers and sisters and extended family members. My kids were placed in separate foster homes in a different county, and I was only given 48 hours total with them during the 377 days they were gone. I exhausted my life savings, and thankfully, I proved my innocence and my kids were returned. But today, I regretfully report to you that 3 out of 7 of my children who never faced 1 ounce of abuse in my care are now sexual assault victims. I can't begin to tell you the heartache of being accused of killing your son, having your 7 kids removed, and learning your kids endured months of sexual assault, all because a social worker failed to do her job and lied at all costs. Today, sadly, my son's abuse in foster care goes uninvestigated. It's time to put justice back into Child Protective Services and get them focused on finding and saving truly abused children. It's time we remove them from the profitable business of tearing loving, non-offending families apart, and it's time to hold the department accountable, the children in their care, the same way the department holds us parents and families accountable during their investigations of abuse and neglect. It's time to hold workers accountable for not following state policies and procedures. According to Angel Eyes Over Texas, in the handbook for reunification services are supposed to be done in parallel to CVS, but sadly in our case, we had 1 social worker doing both jobs. It's time for Texas to join all the other states in reinstating of parental rights, and it's time to form a different outlet for children who are placed in foster homes to be able to freely speak and report their views in state's care. It's time that we listen to the people who matter the most, our children. Thank you.
Well, I will tell you how sorry we are for your loss. And there is a man sitting over there that I want you to talk to before you leave this Capitol building, and his name is Judge Specia, and he is going to listen to further detail about what you experienced.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And what's your name?
Brian. Brian.
Brian, would you like to tell us something? Okay, go ahead. Brian who?
Brian Cook.
Okay, somebody's recording that, so now we know who you are. Go ahead.
My name is Brian Cook. I'm 11 years old. On March 22nd, 2013, my life was forever changed when a Texas social worker picked me up from my school in front of all my friends and told me I'll never see my parents again. I was taken to her office, where she began to tell me I had to say certain things when she turned the cape on in order for me to turn to my parents. Although I'm a child, my parents taught me no matter what the situation may be, you should always tell the truth. My social worker got really angry with me and told me if I didn't say what she wanted to say, I would never see my family again. So after I refused, my social worker told me my family did not love me, they no longer wanted me. So I was going to a foster home and I would never return. I was scared and confused. I was raised in a loving home with parents who have always taken great care of me and all my brothers and sisters. And not one time in my 11 years has either of them ever hit or yelled at me. They have never done drugs or drank alcohol before. My parents have always helped me with schoolwork and helped me life serving God. I begged the social workers to please let me go home. I repeatedly told her she was lying about my parents, but she refused to listen. She told me it didn't matter what I had to say as I'm only a child. I was quickly placed in a foster home away from 4 of my brothers and sisters, and I had to go days without seeing or talking to my parents. I was placed with complete strangers and not allowed to see any of my family members or friends, and was removed from the only school or church I ever knew. I was placed in a foster home that had a total of 14 kids living there. We were given rules and orders we can't tell people or anything that happens in the foster home. We were forced to sign a form promising not to tell. We were given rooms that had alarms placed on the doors that would go off if we left our rooms. My little brother, who is 7, was forced to pee his pants every night. In May 2013, a child started sexually touching my brother in his private parts, and I quickly told the foster parents and reported to my social worker, but they told me it was okay and not to worry about it. In June, the same boy started sexually abusing me. I told again, and nobody listened. Today, I thank God for answering my prayer. The truth came out. My parents never laid one hand on any of my 7 siblings. I was returned home after 377 days, but I was an entire year with my parents and was not allowed 42 hours with them. I missed birthdays, holidays, and the entire summer, all because a social worker was allowed to lie under oath. I may be only a child, but I know right from wrong. And I know no matter what, you should always tell the truth. But my question is, what makes it right for a social worker to be able to lie? What makes it right for a social worker to overlook my sexual abuse and not report it so I can be safe? Today I stand before you, 11-year-old boy, as another victim of a system that is broken. A system that overlooks abuse and instead care and fails to protect children. I was removed from a safe and loving home to return a victim. Today I stand before you, a victim that was sexually violated more than 50 times in foster care. Only because the social workers be able to hide, tell me it was okay. It's not a big deal, and that it's not abuse. How would you feel if I was your child?
Brian, your time's up, but we've got your testimony. I want to thank you, first of all, for coming to talk to us. I mean, it's our job to listen to you and hear what you're saying and do our best to fix what you're telling us was broken, and we are most grateful. And the lesson that you were taught about telling the truth is real important. Ultimately, it will pay off, and I am so sorry that you went through what you went through. But thank you.
Thank you.
Justin,
Yes.
go ahead.
My name is Justin Cook, and I'm 13 years old. I spent the first 12 years of my life free from abuse and neglect, and then I can honestly say I have everything I could ever want, including my 7 brothers and sisters, my friends, my school, sports, and most importantly, my parents and God. On March 22nd of 2013, my life changed instantly when a Texas social worker entered my home and removed me, my brothers and sisters, from the only people who have ever cared for and loved us. And instead of placing me and my siblings with family members, my social worker lied in court and told the judge we had no family to take us. I was instantly placed in a behavior risk foster home, separated from all brothers and sisters, even though I had never had any issues with my behavior and I've always maintained great grades and good conduct. I am not here today seeking help in my case, as my parents fought hard and proved their innocence. But today I do stand before you not as a member, but as a child who is a victim of a failed system. A system that was built to protect children from abuse and neglect, and whose goal is to seek the best interests of a child. Today I stand before you as a victim of repeated sexual and physical abuse in state care, and a victim of Texas social workers who repeatedly lied and refused to help protect me after my many outcries of help. And I also stand before you as a today as a victim of an agency who is hiding my abuse to protect the numbers they are required to report of children who are hurt and abused in their custody. I am a 13-year-old child who was left in foster home where I was held down, beaten, and sexually assaulted on a day-to-day basis. While all my foster parents, my social worker, and my CASA record did nothing to protect me for 271 days. I was repeatedly beaten, yelled at, called names, sexually touched, exposed to drugs and alcohol for the first time in my life, and repeatedly threatened. I can't begin to tell you how it feels to be ripped from a home where I spent 12 years of never being hit or yelled at, and placed into a foster home with strangers where I was scared and alone, where I felt unloved and unwanted, and allowed to be hurt, and where my many outcries for help, my social worker went overlooked and uninvestigated. It's a pain and a fear too that no child should ever feel, and is not in the best interest of any child. Today, my abuse still goes unreported. My foster parents continue to be foster parents, and my abuser walks free. No one has been held accountable, but I thank God every day that my parents fought for the truth, fought for justice, fought for me, and I was returned back to them. My goal today, as I stand before you, is not for myself, but for all children in state care. No amount of therapy can erase my physical and sexual abuse that I faced, and I can never get back the year I lost in my loving family. But I pray today that somehow, some way, my abuse while in state care can prevent any other child from being hurt, neglected, abused, and let down by an agency that has the power to destroy innocent families. I pray that the system finds a way to hold each Texas social worker accountable for their lies, their failure to stop or report abuse in state care. I pray that the rules are changed to allow children who are removed from their parents to be able to go to their families, members who know and truly love them, instead of going into foster homes with complete strangers who allow abuse to occur.
Madam Chair.
Hang on just a minute. Senator Birdwell was first, and then I'll recognize you. Senator Birdwell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a few questions, and I'm not sure that who can answer all of them, but I'll start with this, though, with Mrs. Cook first. I want to make sure I understood what you've laid out. You have some children of your own, and then some that were placed in your care as a foster parent through Child Protective Services.
No, incorrect. I'm a mother of 6 children, and a family member dropped off 2 abused kids that she was hiding from CPS.
Okay. In receiving those 2 children, when the one that passed away, you were then accused of the abuser rather than your family member that had dropped them off.
Yes.
Therefore, by that accusation, you lost all 7 of your children in that interim.
Yes.
You have since received those children back.
Yes.
You said you had spent your life savings. Can you give me without being too intrusive, can you give me I mean, that can be a profound amount, that could be a small amount, but it'll be very important to you, whatever that dollar value is. But I want to get an idea of what we're talking about.
Through the 377 days, we've spent $126,000 fighting for our children.
Okay. My next questions, Madam Chair, are maybe to the judge, to Judge Specia, maybe to Sunset, might be to Commissioner Janik, but it derives to this. Is there a mechanism within DFPS that allows this sort of charge or accusation against DFPS personnel to be independently reviewed? Is there call it a hotline, call it an IG. This is the kind of thing that has to get to leadership yesterday. And I don't know if leadership here knows about this, or this is the first you've heard that. But if this is the first you've heard, that tells me there's a bigger problem in your agency than you know of. If you're hearing it, same time we are. Second, similar to what we do with death penalty cases that have been exonerated, the state provides a compensatory financial payment to those that have been exonerated. Is there a similar mechanism for those that have spent this kind of money that then find themselves being exonerated, that the state owes them the compensatory financial recoupment of having proven themselves innocent? Can anybody in here answer that question?
Um,
Commissioner, do you want to step forward and put the answer on the record? I don't know, or Judge?
Senator Birdwell, there are two different avenues for complaints like this. I have an
Judge
internal.
Speech, I'm sorry, would you
Excuse me,
identify
I'm
yourself
sorry.
for the record?
I'm
just
John
so we
Speech,
can-
Commissioner of the Department of Family and Protective Services. There are two different mechanisms for complaints of this nature. One, I have an internal affairs organization, a consumer affairs, that is independent of program right below me that can investigate this kind of program. Secondly, on criminal type complaints, we have our Office of Inspector General can independently investigate. I am not aware of a compensatory mechanism in this type of case.
Okay. What is the mechanism for a Mrs. Cook to access your internal affairs, or because she's got a due process right, so does your state employee.
Sure, I understand that.
There could be a false accusation being made here. I'm not making a statement here, Mrs. Cook, of saying so.
All she has to do is call my office, and the complaint will be directed to my internal affairs to review and look at. It may have been, I don't know. I need to check on that right now.
And
Okay.
Senator Birdwell, I worry about going in public too deep into
Well,
things. So, but
you're
I would
right,
like
Madam Chair,
for
rather.
you to get with his office. I mean, if this is all accurate, and I have no reason to believe it's not,
Right.
somebody needs to go to jail.
Right.
What
But-
you talked to us, what you described to us is criminal, and there are
Right.
laws against what you talked to us about.
Right.
But rather than going through all this
Well,
in a
you-
public arena, I would prefer that you contact Judge Specia,
Yeah.
and he'll. I guarantee you'll get a response.
We follow protocol. We filed complaints actually with his office and got a response, and we were told it was considered horseplay.
Okay, we've got two issues here. One is that if you followed protocol and it wasn't adhered to, we will address that. But we also need to deal with your specific situation, and I promise you he will get with you.
Right.
I'm going to ask him next time I see him.
Actually, my head of my consumer affairs department is here right now, so I will have him meet with her immediately.
There you go.
Thank
So
you.
Madam
he'll
Chair.
meet you out in the hall.
Senator Birdwell?
Well, you're right. There's a level of decorum that I do not wish to go, but structurally, I do think it is imperative that if the state is the reason a person has spent this kind of money defending themselves to be exonerated, it is just maybe not, it's not a death penalty case, but it is certainly parallel that the state of Texas owes compensatory damages and reimbursement for this adjudication we have to address that, whether it's as an amendment or something. But that's something that's got to be
It's
addressed.
probably not going to be through the sunset process.
Maybe not, ma'am, but
No,
this is something that we absolutely have to discuss. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you. Representative Raymond, I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, I'm just telling Senator Birdwell, I'll carry your bill on the House side, because it's gonna take a bill. It's gonna take a bill.
You know,
Just a couple-
technically, every time you guys are applauding, I'm supposed to be slamming the
Don't
gavel
clap.
down. So,
Don't
just
clap, but.
no enthusiasm.
Just two quick questions. One for Justin. Justin, and I could ask both, but I'm gonna ask you because you're a little older. During the process, is Judge Specia here? Okay. Do you remember ever having a chance to talk to a judge that was deciding where you would be and so forth?
Yes,
Did you have a chance to do that?
I don't know his name. It's one judge. Me and my brother Austin went to him.
You were able to tell them what your circumstances were and so forth?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good.
He was allowed to tell him where he wanted to live, but he was ordered that he was not allowed to speak of his sexual abuse in front of a judge.
Okay, so stuff like that is a problem for me. All right, that's really what I was asking about. Now, Mom, real quick, you said there were two children, including the baby that died.
Yes,
That were-
the mother dropped off a 6-week-old and a 2-year-old.
And did I hear the chair say, and I'm sorry, I don't remember you saying it, was this a relative?
It's a student relative of my husband. They lived in Oklahoma, and she was running from CPS in 2 different states.
And were you, and I'm asking because I've dealt with CPS a lot on this, were you aware that you said they were running from CPS?
Yes, when they placed him in my home, I immediately contacted the CPS that she was running from to make sure I was legally okay to keep the kids, and they approved it. But when I asked for any help, they just left them there.
Did you, but when you did that, were you already aware of the abuse? I guess you looked at the baby and saw the marks and so forth?
I was not aware of the abuse, the extent of the abuse. I just knew that she had a CPS case. She just told us it was just for neglect. I didn't find out until I put the child in the bathtub and noticed his body.
But from the beginning, you made CPS aware?
Yes.
That they, all right, then we really do need to look at this because it's just something wrong here. Thank you.
Representative Dutton?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to say thanks to these young men for coming here and sharing their story. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And I want to say on behalf of everybody in the state legislature, thank you all for coming here. But I also want to say, this is my 15th session, Madam Chair, and I don't think I've ever heard a worse story of government abuse in my 30 years of being around here. I've never heard of a story so bad, so egregious that it just almost invites a rage in me. I mean, this is government at its worst, and perhaps we can't really fix it for this family, but we ought to be darn sure that we fix it for any other family.
Doesn't happen again.
And so I just want to say thank you all for sharing. But just know that we're going to fix this. We're going to fix it, and it's not going to take another Sunset Commission hearing for us to do it. We're going to start today to get it fixed. And so if you want to check back with us, I guarantee you we'll figure out a way to get it fixed and get it resolved. But again, thank you all for being here, and thank you for sharing your story with us. It's not like any other story I've ever heard in state government, but this is clearly government at its worst. And so with that, let me again just say thank you, ma'am, for sharing with us as well.
Thank you. We have the Dove family. Which one's Deborah and which one's Aurora?
I'm the mom. This is Aurora. I'm Deborah.
And you're Deborah?
Yes.
Okay, Deborah, I'm going to let you go first
Well,
unless you want.
I need her to go first because there's something in my report that she does not need to hear.
Okay, Aurora, we need you to tell us your name, and I'd love to know how old you are.
Aurora.
How old are you?
Oh. Hello, my name is Aurora Dove, and I'm 10 years old. I live with my mom and dad. I would have to say that I have the best mom and dad ever. They both love me and support me very much. And they would never do anything to hurt me at all. In February 2010 for 3 months and October 2010 for 8 months, I was kidnapped from my mom and dad because of the lies told to CPS by Ariel and Pat Craig. The first time was the only time I met or talked to an investigator. And she kept telling me to tell her that my mom hurt me and stuff. My mom and dad taught me not to lie because God does not like liars. I told her that my mom was a loving mom and she would never hurt me or Ariel. I did tell her that Ariel was mad because my mom had rules and that she didn't like them. and because my mom wouldn't let Ariel see Pat, because Pat told her to lie and go live with her, and to go live with her. The second time I was taken from my mom and dad, I was begging, screaming, yelling, and crying, and telling them that my mom would never hurt me or Ariel. Pat and the investigator were lying about my mom, but I was only 6 years old. It's like my voice didn't matter to anyone. After 3 foster homes that Ariel got us kicked out of, they separated us, and I was put with Grace. This is where they started giving me sleeping pills for crying and begging to go home, and telling everyone still that my mom never hurt us. These people would lock me in a dark room and starve me. They hit me, and they hit me, and then the CPS worker told me if I didn't lie about my mom or dad, I wouldn't go home ever again. My mom and dad got me back and started talking to our family therapist, and my mom and I were labeled with PTSD because of what we went through. I feel that as a little kid that's seen, heard, and has been torn from my mother's arms because of the lies, because of a caseworker A caseworker needs to get in trouble because she didn't follow the rules, and from going to elementary school, if you don't follow the rules, you get in trouble. But I've always followed the rules. I really feel that the caseworkers should not be allowed to tell you what to say just because they don't believe a kid is telling the truth and that their parents don't hurt them. I know from the past that my words don't mean much because I'm just a kid, but all I can do is what I was raised to do. Tell the truth.
Telling the truth is a good thing. Thank you for coming and testifying. We appreciate that. Mom, do you want to testify also?
Angel's going to take her out for me, but yes.
Who's going to take her?
I'll take her.
I see. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Well, yeah. You all can go, and Deborah is going to testify, and let me call the next 3 people to come up. Dwayne Lambert, Diana Martinez, Susan Millam. You can go on and grab a seat.
Oh, just let me know when I'm ready.
Millam. We'll find out. Deborah, go ahead.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Dove. I'm not going to say my age, but y'all have heard my daughter. I'm going to try not to read what you guys have in your hands because y'all are going to read it. But I feel that 18 to 17 years is a little long to do a review over what I feel is a very corrupted agency because, as you heard from Angel and her children and my own daughter, there are guidelines that have not been met with caseworkers that are telling our children that if they don't lie, they don't come home. And my daughter never knew abuse until after she was taken from me in my home. She was rarely ever spanked. And when I do discipline my child, I spank her 1 time on the butt, and that's it. I was told that was abuse. The way I kissed my daughter just now when she left, they told me that was sexual assault. That is what they've told me. I have the court records. I've had the, what is the lady who types the stuff? I have all that records, and CPS documented that the way I just kissed my daughter was sexual assault. As a parent, that is my right to kiss my child, to tell her goodbye and that I love her. That is my right as a parent. And when they were talking about the Ombudsman's office and the Office of Consumer Affairs, I feel that it needs to be totally independent. It needs to be out of the hands of the department, out of the hands of CPS. No offense, Your Honor, wherever he's at. It's the fact that when you have inside sources doing their own internal investigations, they're not going to admit that they've done screwed up. I mean, you've got 2 cases right here that they're not admitting that they've done screwed up with 2 families alone. And they need an independent ombudsman's office. No work-related workers need to be having work-related history with CPS. They need to be very independent. At that point, when it comes to who she stated, I feel that the 800 line, when people call anonymously, y'all are, the office by law, they do not tell us who the reporter is at all. But since the reporter is not revealed to us as parents against us, I feel that the 800 number should not be allowed to take, quote, anonymous callings, because a lot of people use that 800 number as retaliation against people. And that's what was done in my aspect. Representative Raymond and both Senator Birdwell and Hinojosa, I'm sorry I've spelled your name wrong in the paperwork, but I totally agree on what you three were saying yesterday, because it has been since the 80s that, changes have been made. And it's the fact that nobody is overseeing the department, and nobody is willing to say, hey, look, we've screwed up. And parents are paying the price, and so are our children.
Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Time's up. Representative Burkett.
Yes, you may not be able to answer for both of y'all, but were you and Mrs. Cook with the same worker in the same, out of the
No,
same
ma'am.
area?
I was in Wilson County, and she actually lives up north, and totally two different judges too. But I had a judge who was a CPS prosecutor on my case, so it's like I walked in and didn't even have a chance.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
For being here.
Can I go see my
Mr.
daughter?
Lambert? Sure, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. Lambert?
My name is Dwayne Lambert. I'm the Executive Director of Lighthouse Family Network, a small child policing agency, out of Bell County. My mom and dad, who are gone now, were involved in foster care even before the state of Texas ever was, taking in migrant children, and we had kids in our home at all times. The Lighthouse we've been an agency now for 18 years, and we've had a great deal of experience there. Thank you. I wanted to address the foster care redesign issue, and I was so pleased to hear Commissioner Janik say that we need to pay attention to what goes on in other states. Check things out like that. Go to another state to see where they possibly have done this before. Then Judge Specia, he also said we need to try things, and if they don't work, we need to go on to others. That's what he said yesterday. Yep. The Sunset staff shared with us that they were very concerned, and that we should really, it's a risk, so we should really go about it with some real caution. Well, those folks did some very good work there. The light is shining on a lot of things, not just the redesign. It is a risk to continue the rollout. I was disappointed in the closing remarks from both commissioners that there was not even one word mentioned about the redesign point. It is one that is very costly. If we want to look outside, as Commissioner Janik suggested, we should look at Nebraska. Nebraska has lost millions upon millions of dollars. Finally, the legislature closed the whole thing down just to save it. Put it back in the hands of the department. They lost so many foster homes, seasoned foster homes, those that have been foster parents for many, many years. We need to pay attention to what they found in this thing, and we need to slow the roll on this thing and really look at it for what it is. This is a for-profit, publicly held company, and they have not produced anything in the year that we've had. There's nothing, the staff couldn't even find anything to answer the questions about how that was going. I can tell you how it's going. They're asking for a lot more, millions of dollars already. It follows the trail. The bricks are falling just like it did in Nebraska. On the computer system thing, we need to do something about it. Our caseworkers, there's wonderful caseworkers out there, and there are some plenty that are bad also. Their hands are tied. They can't get to information immediately. We need to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and testifying. We appreciate your being here. We appreciate your work with children.
Thank you.
Ms. Martinez?
Madam Chair, members, my name is Diana Martinez. I'm Director of Public Policy and Education for Tex Protects, the Texas Association for the Protection of Children, and I would like to add to the discussion about CPS caseworker turnover. Judge Specia really hit it on the head yesterday when he talked about that we're not attracting the right type of worker. Retention begins with recruitment, and pay and benefits have to increase if we want to increase the talent in the labor pool that we're looking at, that we're drawing our candidates from. The job has to be desirable, and CPS has to be able to compete with other professions that are drawing those interested in helping children. Overall, having higher compensation, including pay per performance for merit pay, will attract those higher quality social workers who we currently can't attract because to other positions that are paying higher. For example, the average starting teacher in Texas makes $41,000 compared to our dangerous CPS caseworkers jobs where they're starting at $32,000. We also need to make sure that the job is presented in a honest, factual light. Something along the lines of adding maybe a day in a life video that tracks the caseworker through their day, like, you know, the youth of today are interested in and watched on YouTube. Also, the other part of that recruitment puzzle is incentivizing those that train, that screen, that hire. We need to structure pay for performance for recruiting, hire specialists, trainers, with merit bonuses based on how long they're retaining those people they're getting through. Year one, they get so much. Year two, year three. So we're incentivizing them to look for and train people correctly. We also need to make sure that those hiring personnel and trainer have real program experience, frontline experience, and that we're rotating them into the field so that they stay current on topics. Having been in the field many years ago isn't good enough. Strongly agree with including the supervisor in the training process. They have a good eye on who's going to stay and who's going to fit in. Looking at the retention, the workload, the work environment, the supervision, we need to really improve work environment. We need to cap caseloads for academy recruits coming out of the academy. They're getting full caseloads as soon as they come out in some regions. Strong mentorship program, we strongly agree with that. We would say look at New Hampshire, North Carolina. Those states have drastically reduced their turnover by a strong mentorship program. Make it a atmosphere, go further than Judge Peace is doing a great job of going out there and making sure people know this is not a place of retaliation and fear. This is a positive work environment, positive results. Don't look at things like timeliness and currency. Those aren't based on getting your good outcomes. Just because a decision is made quickly, that doesn't mean it's going to be the right decision. So make sure that we're looking at those things that are in the control of the caseworker, but that also are good outcomes for those kids.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Susan?
My name is Sue Milam. I am representing the National Association of Social Workers, Texas chapter. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have to say at the onset there are copies being distributed to you of my testimony, but I'd really like to focus on two main points here related to issue one, which has to do with retention of the caseworkers. Ditto everything that Diana just said about focusing on pay and benefits. The Sunset Review really didn't highlight the problem with pay, but as Diana mentioned, a social worker, that's someone with a social work related profession, they come out of school, they take one of these jobs, and the starting pay for CPS is right at $32,000. For APS, it's even worse. It's right at about $30,000. You compare that to someone with a 4-year degree in nursing, even for the state, that's another $36,000 they might earn, or a teacher in the low 40s. So the choices for someone that has a 4-year degree, someone who comes out of school and is ready and willing to really help the community do the right thing, take these jobs. They come out and lo and behold, they get this job that suddenly they discover they can't afford to live on. You put on top of that the average Texas graduate from Texas schools now graduates with more than $20,000 in student debt. So that becomes a real issue. Again, these folks that are going through schools of social work, even education, are not looking to make big bucks, but they are looking to be able to pay for their student debt as well as their living expenses. So we put that additional stress on these caseworkers. Again, you've heard a tragic case. Most caseworkers are just doing the best they can with what they have. And I really think that if we look at increasing their pay to a reasonable amount, comparable to teachers, if you look at a loan forgiveness program that gets right at the heart of retention, give them a $5,000 payment on their loan for every year they stay. And by the time they stay for a year, 2, 3, now you've got a workforce that knows what they're doing, and you're going to see the outcomes that you want. So I want you to think about where the best investment is going to be. It is not in paying what we pay and seeing this constant roiling and turning over of caseworkers who don't stay long enough to do the good job that you expect of them. So thank you for the work of the Sunset Commission. We're very hopeful that this will cause some changes to occur that really need to happen.
Thank you for being here. Thank you to this panel. Chair calls Charles Orter, Ashley Harris, Kathleen Barillas, and Crystal Bentley